Hello everyone! Today we're making a cute Capybara Quiet Book. I guide you step by step so even beginners can follow along. This fun book also teaches kids about capybaras, their favorite foods, and their animal friends. Let's begin and enjoy the process together. You will need stiff felt, and it's best to use Korean felt, as well as a few additional tools. You can find the full list together with links to the shops where you can buy them in the description. Use your cutting machine or print and cut out the patterns I've prepared. Then place them on the felt, trace the shapes using a disappearing marker and cut along the lines. You can find the download link in the description and in the first comment. Prepare faux fur and felt elements for making the cover. Place the faux fur under the opening and sew both layers along the edge using beige thread. Sew slowly about 2 mm from the edge. Take your time and don't rush. If you would like to see how I hide the threads after sewing, check out the tutorial. You will find the link at the top of the screen. In the next step, turn it inside out and trim the excess faux fur beyond the stitch line. Do it slowly and be careful not to cut the seam or the felt piece. Using double-sided tape, attach the black elements under the eye and nostril openings, just like I'm doing. Place the heads on the body pieces and sew both pieces together only along the lower edges. At the beginning and at the end, sew forward and then backward and repeat this to secure the seam. This will keep the stitching from coming undone. In the next step, place the following pieces just as I do and sew each one separately along the edges, matching the thread color to the felt color. On the small capybara's head, draw the eyes and cheeks with a disappearing marker. Embroider them using the French knot method. In the previous tutorial, I explained this method step by step. You can find the link at the top of the screen. Place the arms on the tummy just as I do and secure them with clips. Then place the legs underneath and use clips to hold them in place as well. Place the capybaras on the light brown felt. Sew the small capybara simply along the edges, leaving the legs unsewn. The big one sew along the edge starting from this point to this point. Make sure both the top and bottom threads are beige. When sewing the big capybara, at the beginning and at the end, sew forward then backward and repeat this twice, just like when sewing the head in the previous step. Next, trim the excess felt along the edge of the capybaras. Place the butterfly elements on the head of the large capybara like this, and sew only the red element along the center line twice. Place the green pieces on top of the other just like I do and draw dots with a disappearing marker to represent flowers. Then embroider them using the French knot method. If you prefer, you can sew small beads or buttons in these places or skip this step entirely. Place the prepared element on the blue base page and sew the larger piece along the edge. Then place the smaller one on top and sew it from this point to that point. At the beginning and at the end of sewing, stitch forward and then backward and repeat this 2 times. Finally, place the sun elements and sew along the edge, stitching only the circle. Place the finished page on the blue felt and sew along the edges. Remember to make sure the bottom thread is blue. And finally, trim the excess felt along the edge of the page. Place the dark blue piece on the cream base page, 7 mm from the bottom edge, and sew it along the edge. Also sew the elements in the middle in the same way. In the upper part of the element, draw a dot with a disappearing marker and place the blade so that its opening aligns with the drawn dot. Then draw lines on the sides along the side openings. Place the page on a cutting mat and make cuts along the drawn lines using a wallpaper knife. Take a piece with an indentation in the center and insert its protruding parts through the holes you made earlier. Turn the page over, place the plate on top, and fold the protruding parts outward. Place the brown piece in the center of the cream circle and sew along the edge. Remember to make sure the bottom thread is white. Next, place the colorful circles at the top in the same positions as I do and sew each one along the edge. Turn the piece over to the other side, then draw a dot in the center. In this spot, attach the remaining two parts of the magnetic clasp in the same way as before. Place the clear vinyl under the beige piece and sew both layers along the edge of the opening. Next, turn the piece over and trim the excess clear vinyl beyond the stitch line. Use double-sided tape to attach the brown piece, then sew it along the edge. Place the finished piece in the center. We will start sewing along the edge from this point and stop here. Inside we will add the small beads and then continue sewing until we reach the point where we started. Remember that the bottom thread must be wide. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edge. Draw and embroider an eye on the white piece. Place the black element on the piece of black felt and sew it on, leaving the tail unstitched. Remember to use black thread for both the top and bottom threads. Then place the remaining elements on the black felt just as I do and sew each one separately along the edges. Remember that the bottom thread should be black. Place the wing here and sew it along this line, stitching it twice. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edges. Draw and embroider an eye, then place it on the light green felt and sew along the edge, leaving out the legs and the tail. Remember that the bottom thread should be green. Place the shell on top and sew it on. On the shell, draw additional lines with a disappearing marker. Then you can either trace them with a fabric marker, sew along those lines using a sewing machine, or skip this step entirely. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edge. Place the felt elements as I do and sew each one separately along the edges. In the next step, draw and embroider the eyes and nostrils. I embroider the eyes using embroidery floss with the French knot method, just like before. For the nostrils, I use 2 strands of black thread instead of embroidery floss, so the dots are smaller. Place the body on the light brown felt and sew it on, leaving out the tail and arms. And then place the head on top and sew it on. Place the paws on the belly and sew them along these lines twice. Finally, trim the excess felt. Draw and embroider an eye on the head. Place the pieces on yellow felt, one on top of the other, according just like me, and sew each one separately. Remember that the bottom thread should be yellow. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edge. Sew the white circle onto the blue piece. Then draw and embroider an eye. Place the pink piece under the blue piece just as I do, then secure it with clips and place everything on the blue felt. Next, sew only the blue piece. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edge of the blue piece. Place the white circle and the wing on the green piece, just as I do, and sew both along the edges. Then draw and embroider an eye. Place legs and tail under the green piece and secure them with clip. Then place everything on the green felt and sew only the green piece. Put the beak on top and sew it in place. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edge, leaving the legs and tail free. Prepare double-sided velcro tape. This is not a classic velcro tape. Please note that one side is the hook side and the other side is the loop side. Place the velcro pattern on it and cut off the shape. In total, we will need 35 of these shapes. Using hot glue, we will attach them to the back of the movable elements, applying the glue to the loop side. Glue the first 7 pieces to the back of the animals. In this type of velcro, the hook side is gentle enough that when attached to felt, it doesn't damage it, which is why it works perfectly for our project. Place the finished page on the cream felt and sew along the edges. Then trim the excess felt just as we did with the cover. Place the black piece on the green base page 12 mm from the bottom edge and sew along the edge. Next, place the cheeks and ears and sew each one separately along the edges. Take the tooth piece and draw a line in the center. Then sew it twice using a sewing machine. Set the bottom thread to white. Using double-sided tape, place the black element under the brown piece and attach it. Then place the teeth piece at the very bottom, leaving about 2 cm sticking out, secure it with a clip, and place everything on the head in this position. Next, sew only the brown piece. Place the finished head on the base page so that it covers the black piece and sew it on. Sew the mane from this point to this point. At the beginning and the end, sew forward and then backward, and repeat this twice to secure the piece firmly. Place the finished page on the green felt and sew along the edges. Then trim the excess felt just as we did before. On the orange piece, draw additional lines with a disappearing marker and then embroider them or sewing them on the machine. I will embroider them with the orange embroidery floss. Place the finished piece over the leaf, secure it with a clip, and place everything on the orange felt. Then sew only the orange piece. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edge of the orange piece. Place the apple elements on top of each other just as I do on the red felt, and sew each one separately along the edges. Remember that the bottom thread should be red. Then cut off excess felt along the edge. Place the light green piece on the dark green one and sew it in place. Set the bottom thread to green. Place the black piece under the red piece, then position everything on the light green base so that their inner edges meet. Next, sew the red piece in place. On the leaf elements, draw additional lines with a disappearing marker and then embroider them with a green floss. Place the leaves on top of another just as I do on the dark brown felt and sew each one separately. Remember that the bottom thread should be brown. Place the final element on top and sew it in place. Finally, trim the excess felt. Place the yellow element under the red piece, then position everything on the red felt and sew along the edge. Set the bottom thread to red. Place the leaf at the top and sew it along this line twice. Finally, trim the excess felt. Place the grass elements on the green felt one on top of another just as I do, and sew each one separately along the center twice. Set both the top and bottom thread to green. At the end, trim the excess felt along the edges. Place the black pieces underneath the eye openings and secure them using double-sided tape. Sew the daughter capybara in the same way as the son. If you don't remember, please go back to the beginning of the video. Next, place the butterfly on top of the head and sew only along this line twice. Set the bottom thread to brown. In the center of the butterfly, sew on a bead. Remember to use a double thread when threading the needle. In the next step, draw and embroider the cheeks. Place the green piece 7 mm from the bottom edge and sew it on. Then position the brown piece above it and sew it as well. In the next step, draw and embroider the nostrils. Attach the finished element to the pink base page 10 mm from the bottom edge using clips. Prepare the ribbon, mine is 4 cm wide, and cut 2 pieces measuring 4 cm each. Place the ribbon underneath the 2 brown pieces and secure them with clips. Then place them on the brown felt and sew along the edges, making sure both the top and bottom thread are brown. Finally, trim the excess felt along the edges. Turn the pieces over, then on the ribbons measure 10 mm from the edge of the brown elements. Then slide them under the wardrobe piece so that they stick out about 10 mm on each side and their bottom edges are aligned in one line. Finally, sew the brown piece along the edge. On the protruding part of the door, sew on a button. Mine is 2 cm in diameter. Place the finished base page on pink felt and sew along the edges. Then trim off the excess felt as we did last time. On the red dress, draw an additional line and embroider it with black embroidery floss. Place the back pieces one on top of the other and sew each one separately along the edge. In the next step, draw and embroider a dot. Place the hearts on the yellow dress and sew each one separately along the center line twice. Sew the pockets onto the blue blouse along the edges. Then draw and embroider 3 dots that will be the blouse buttons. On the next element, draw additional lines and sew them on using a sewing machine, matching the thread color to the felt color. Place all elements on matching colored felt and sew along the edges. Remember to match the bottom thread to the color of the felt. Then trim excess felt along the edges. Place the last element on the cream dress and sew it along the center line twice. Turn all the clothes inside out and using hot glue attach the velcro tape, applying the glue to the soft side. Open the right door and also attach velcro to the protruding part. Attach velcro to the back side of the daughter capybara as well. I've also prepared 3 additional designs with rhymes that need to be laminated. I'd place the printed rhymes into a laminated sheet and then put them into the laminator. Then I cut them out along the edges. In the next step, place the cutout pieces on white felt and sew them along the edges, using white thread for both the top and bottom threads. Then cut them out along the edges. Turn the pieces inside out and attach 2 velcro pieces to each one. In the base page pattern, make a hole in the marked spot. Then place the pattern on each base page and draw a dot through the hole. In these spots, punch holes using a hole punch. Mine is 5 mm in diameter. Stack the pages on top of each other, thread a lace through them, and then tie a bow. The Capybara Quiet Book is finished. If you would like to make another quiet book, click on the thumbnails on the screen. Thank you for your comments and support. Greetings from Poland and see you in the next video. Bye bye!